They called my job a joke, right up until the moment my sister walked into my office and realized I was the one deciding whether she had a future. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were never about food. They were performance reviews, not official ones, not written down, but somehow more brutal than anything you'd ever get in a corporate boardroom. There was always the same script. My mother would place the roast on the table, like it meant stability. My father would lower the TV volume just enough to pretend he was listening. And then right on cue, someone would bring up my sister. Elena, golden child, corner office, senior director of something that sounded expensive and important. They said her title the way people say success, slow, proud, certain, and then, eventually, they would look at me, not directly at first. Just a glance, a pause, a shift in tone. And you? My father would ask, like he was pointing at a broken object he didn't remember buying. Still doing that? Little thing of yours? That little thing. 6 years of my life, reduced to a sentence that didn't even deserve a noun. I would smile, not because it didn't hurt, but because I had learned something dangerous a long time ago. People don't ask questions to understand you. They ask questions to confirm what they've already decided. So I stopped explaining. I stopped correcting. I stopped trying to win a game where the scoreboard was rigged before I even walked into the room. I just passed the bread, nodded, and let them believe whatever made them comfortable. Because here's the part they never knew. Every Sunday night, after they finished dissecting my pathetic life, I went back to a company I had built from nothing. A company with real clients, real stakes, real consequences. A company that did not care what my father thought. A company where results spoke louder than titles and silence was more powerful than validation. And for 6 years, I kept it that way. No announcements, no explanations, no proof. Because once you show people who underestimated you what you've become, you don't just prove them wrong. You give them access to something they never believed you deserved. And I wasn't ready to give them that. Not yet. But then everything changed. Because on one random Monday morning, while reviewing candidates for a senior position at my firm, I saw a name that made my hand stop mid-page. Eliana Riviera, my sister, applying to my company, and she had no idea it was mine. That's the moment I realized something. This wasn't going to be about revenge. It wasn't going to be about proving anything. It was going to be about something much more dangerous. What happens when the person who spent years looking down on you sits across from you and finally has to look up? And when she walked into that boardroom the next day, everything we thought we knew about each other started to fall apart. Everything looked normal on the surface. That was the most dangerous part. If you walked into my parents' house on a Sunday evening, you'd think you were looking at a perfectly functional family. The kind people point to and say, they did something right. The table was always set before I arrived. Same plates, same glasses, same folded napkins that my mother insisted on arranging like small acts of control. The smell of roasted meat would fill the hallway before I even took my shoes off. Warm, familiar, predictable, comforting if you didn't know what it really was. Because Sunday dinner wasn't about connection, it was about hierarchy. Adrian, is that you? My mother's voice always came from the kitchen, always half buried in the sound of something boiling, sizzling, or being stirred too carefully. Yeah. I'd step inside, close the door behind me, and already feel it the shift. Like walking into a room where a conversation had been paused just long enough for you to enter, and would resume the moment you sat down. My father would be in the living room, remote in hand, watching sports at a volume that made conversation optional. He'd lower it when I walked in, not turn it off, just lower it. 3 clicks, always 3. His version of acknowledgement. There he is, he'd say, without looking away from the screen. Not warmth, not pride, just confirmation that I existed. And then there was my sister, Isabella. She was always already there. Perfect posture, perfect timing, perfect presentation. She didn't arrive at Sunday dinner. She appeared in it, like she had stepped out of a version of herself she'd rehearsed in the mirror before leaving her apartment. Blazer, hair done, expression controlled. She didn't need to say she was successful. The room said it for her. Adrian, she'd say, leaning in for a quick, precise cheek kiss. Not cold, not warm either. Efficient, like everything else about her. Isabella. That was our entire interaction most nights. Two people who had shared a home for nearly 2 decades, reduced to a greeting that lasted less than 3 seconds. The dinner always followed the same rhythm. Not a routine, a rhythm. Subtle enough that if you weren't paying attention, you'd think it was spontaneous. But it wasn't. It never was. First phase. Establish normalcy. My father would talk about something external. Golf. A friend who moved states. A man who had just been promoted somewhere important. He liked talking about other men's success. It gave him something measurable to believe in. My mother would respond in short affirmations. That's nice. Good for him. Hard work pays off. She believed in effort, even when she didn't understand outcomes. Second phase. Reinforce the golden standard. Isabella would casually mention something about work. Never directly bragging. She was too smart for that. Instead, she'd drop information the way professionals drop metrics. Controlled. Intentional. Just enough. A client signed off on the campaign. We're expanding into a new market. I might be taking on a bigger team soon. My father would nod. That slow, satisfied nod. The kind that says, yes, this confirms what I already believe. My mother would smile. That's wonderful, sweetheart. And she meant it. Fully. Without complication. And then came the third phase. The one that mattered. The one that always landed. My father would put his fork down. That was the signal. He only did that when he was about to say something that had weight. Something intentional. Something he'd been waiting to deliver. And you? He'd say. Not my name. Just you. A gesture in my direction. Vague. Dismissive. Accurate. Still working on that thing of yours? There it was. Every time. Different words. Same meaning. The table would go quiet. Not dramatically. No one gasped. No one reacted. But something shifted. My mother would suddenly become very interested in her plate. Isabella would reach for something: water, bread, anything to occupy her hands. And me? I'd smile. Not because I found it funny. Not because it didn't sting. But because I had already learned the most important rule of that table. Nothing you say will change the story they've already decided about you. Yeah, I'd say lightly, still working on it. And that would be enough. For them, for the moment, for the illusion to continue. Here's what people don't understand about being underestimated. At first, you fight it. You explain. You defend. You try to correct the narrative. You think, if they just knew the truth, everything would change. But then, something shifts. You realize they're not asking for information. They're asking for confirmation. They don't want to understand you. They want you to fit into the version of you that makes their world make sense. And once you see that, you stop talking. I stopped explaining my work when I was 26. Stopped trying to describe something they had already dismissed at 24. Stopped correcting them entirely by 28. Not out of anger, out of efficiency. Because explaining yourself to someone who has already decided who you are is like pitching an idea to a client who's already signed a contract with someone else. You're not being evaluated. You're being ignored. So I let them believe it. That I was trying something. That I was figuring things out. That I was still not quite there. I let them build a version of me that was smaller than reality. Less threatening. Easier to categorize. Because the truth would have required them to reevaluate everything. And most people would rather protect their worldview than update it. Dinner would continue. My mother would ask if I wanted more gravy. My father would go back to talking about someone else's promotion. Isabella would carry on with her polished, controlled success narrative. And I would sit there, silent, watching it all like I wasn't part of it. But I was, just not in the way they thought. Because every Sunday night, after the plates were cleared, after the conversation dissolved into background noise, after I walked out that door and got into my car, my real life started. The drive back to the city was always the same. Same route, same lights, same long red at the intersection that seemed to last forever. I never rushed it. I never changed the radio. I just sat there, hands on the wheel, watching the reflection of a life they didn't know about slowly come back into focus. Because 22 minutes away from that house, everything changed. The building I worked in didn't look impressive from the outside. Converted industrial space, old brick, minimal signage, the kind of place people overlook, which, in a way, was fitting. But inside was something entirely different. Open floor, glass walls, whiteboards filled with ideas that actually mattered. People moving with purpose, decisions being made in real time, consequences that didn't care about anyone's opinion, only results. 38 people worked there. 38. 6 years ago, it was just me and a borrowed desk in a space that leaked when it rained. Now, it was a company. My company. And here's the part no one at that dinner table knew. Every Monday morning, I wasn't going to a job. I was walking into a room where people looked to me for answers, for direction, for decisions that affected their careers, their work, their lives. I didn't need my father's approval there. I didn't need my mother's reassurance. I didn't need Isabella's validation. Because in that space, what I had built was undeniable, and I kept it that way. Quiet, contained, untouched by the people who had already decided I wasn't worth listening to. Not because I was afraid, but because I understood something most people don't. Not everyone deserves access to your truth, especially the ones who've already proven they wouldn't know what to do with it. For 6 years, I protected that separation. Family on one side, reality on the other. No overlap, no risk, no need, until the morning that changed everything. Because the moment those two worlds collided wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't happen at the dinner table. It happened quietly. On a Monday morning, when I opened a candidate file and saw a name that forced both versions of my life into the same room. And for the first time in years, I couldn't stay silent anymore. Monday mornings had a rhythm of their own, not the suffocating kind from Sunday dinners. A different kind. Cleaner, sharper, real. I got to the office early, before the noise, before the movement, before the expectations started stacking on top of each other. There's something about an empty workspace that tells the truth. No performance, no titles, no hierarchy, just potential. I unlocked the glass door at 7:28 a.m. Lights flicked on one row at a time, desks still untouched, whiteboards still holding last week's thinking, coffee machine just starting to wake up. This was my favorite part of the day. Not because it was peaceful, but because it was mine. No one questioning me, no one measuring me, no one reducing me to something smaller than what I had built. Just me and the reality I had created from nothing. I dropped my bag on the desk, laptop open, coffee in hand. Nothing glamorous. No big CEO moment. Just work. By 8, the office started breathing. Voices, footsteps, the quiet hum of people who actually cared about what they were building. Marcus came in at 8:43. Always 2 minutes early. Always precise. Always composed. He didn't waste words. That's why I trusted him. Morning, he said, dropping into the chair across from me. Morning. He opened his laptop without looking at me. You'll want to check the 10 a.m. candidate tomorrow. Creative director slot. I nodded, scrolling through emails. Strong portfolio? Very. That was all he said. No hype. No overselling. When Marcus said very, it meant something. I didn't open the file right away. Not because I wasn't curious, because I had learned something else over the years. The order you look at things matters. If you start your day reacting, you lose control of it. So I worked. Reviewed a campaign. Adjusted a proposal. Left comments on a deck that was almost right but not quite. The usual. The kind of decisions that look small until you realize they're the difference between something working and something failing quietly. By 9:12, I finally opened the candidate folder. Paper. I still preferred paper for final rounds. Something about it forced you to slow down, to actually see what was in front of you. Portfolio first. Clean layout. Confident choices. No unnecessary noise. Whoever built this knew what they were doing. I flipped through slowly. Brand systems. Campaign structures. Case studies that didn't try too hard to impress, but didn't need to. Marcus was right. This was strong. And then I turned the page. Name. I didn't react immediately. Not outwardly. But something in my body paused. Not panic. Not shock. Something quieter. More precise. Recognition. Eliana Riviera. I read it again, not because I needed to. Because my brain was trying to process something it hadn't prepared for. My sister had applied to my company. The office around me didn't change. People were still talking. Phones still ringing. Coffee still brewing. Everything moved exactly the same. But inside that moment, something shifted. She had no idea. Of course she didn't. Why would she? I had never told her the company name, never shared details, never corrected the version of me she had built in her head. To her, I was still the one figuring things out, still building that little thing, still behind. And now she was sitting somewhere, probably feeling confident, probably believing she was stepping into another opportunity, another role that matched her trajectory, another step up. Without realizing, she had just walked directly into my world. I leaned back in my chair, not reacting, just thinking. This was the moment people fantasize about, the perfect reversal, the clean, cinematic version of justice, where the person who doubted you finally stands in front of you and realizes they were wrong. But real life isn't clean. It's complicated. And more importantly, it forces you to answer a question most people avoid. What do you actually want? Revenge? Easy. Cancel the interview. Reject the application. Never let her know how close she came. Power? Also easy. Let her walk into the room. Let the realization hit. Watch her recalibrate in real time. Closure? That one was harder, because closure doesn't come from winning. It comes from understanding. I looked back at the portfolio, forced myself to go through it again, this time without the name attached. And that's when it got uncomfortable, because she was good. Not good for someone I know. Not good compared to expectations. Just good. The early work had energy, the kind you lose if you become too careful. But then around the middle, something changed. The ideas got sharper, more intentional, less safe. She had evolved. I didn't want her to be that good. That was the truth. And I sat with that for a moment. Didn't ignore it. Didn't justify it. Just acknowledged it. Because that's another thing success teaches you. If you lie to yourself about your own emotions, you lose clarity. And clarity is everything. I kept reading. 8 years of experience, 4 companies, steady progression. Title, Senior Creative Lead. But something didn't add up. The projects listed didn't match the scope she was implying. Not exactly. Close enough to pass, but not exact. It wasn't a lie. It was inflation. The kind people use to fill gaps they don't want others to see. I knew that game. I had played the opposite version of it for years, making myself look smaller instead of bigger. She had been performing success. I had been hiding it. Same instinct. Different direction. I closed the folder. Not because I was done, because I needed space to think. This wasn't just a hiring decision anymore. It couldn't be, because whatever happened next would not stay inside that room. It would leak. Into family, into perception, into the fragile structure we had all been maintaining for years. I could feel it now. That tension. The kind that doesn't explode, but reshapes everything quietly. Marcus walked past my desk. Paused. You saw it. Not a question. A statement. I looked up at him. Yeah. He didn't ask how I felt. Didn't ask what I was going to do. That's why he was my COO. Do you want me to pull it? He asked. Clean. Efficient. No drama. I could say yes. End it right there. No confrontation. No awkwardness. No emotional risk. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. No. He nodded once. Okay. And walked away. That was it. Decision made. But not really. Because saying no didn't answer the real question. It just committed me to facing it. The rest of the day blurred. Meetings, decisions, conversations. I did everything I was supposed to do. Exactly how I always did it. But underneath all of it, there was a second layer running, a constant loop. What happens when she walks in? What happens when she sees you? What happens when the version of you she believes in collides with the version of you that actually exists? And the hardest question of all, who are you going to be in that moment? Not the version your family created, not the version your success built, but the version that chooses when it actually matters. Because that's the thing no one tells you about power. It doesn't reveal itself when things are easy. It shows up when you finally have the chance to do what was done to you. That night, I sat in my apartment. City lights stretching across the window. Silent. Still. I thought about calling my mother. Didn't. Thought about texting Elena. Didn't. Because anything I said would change the moment. And I needed that moment to be real. Unscripted. Uncontrolled. For 6 years, I had stayed silent to protect myself. Tomorrow, that silence would break, not because I needed to prove anything, but because for the first time, I had nothing to hide. And neither did she. She just didn't know it yet. Tuesday morning felt normal. That was the strangest part. No dramatic buildup, no sense of destiny, no cinematic music playing in the background. Just another workday. I arrived at 7:30, same as always. Unlocked the door, turned on the lights, watched the office slowly come alive. Coffee, emails, silence, routine. And yet, everything underneath that routine had changed. Because at 10 a.m., for the first time in 6 years, two versions of my life were about to collide. I didn't think about it, not intentionally. I focused on small things, emails that didn't matter, a proposal that needed minor edits, a meeting that could have been an email, anything that kept my mind from drifting toward the one thing waiting for me. 9:45 Jordan appeared at my door. She's here. Of course she was. Elena had always been early. Prepared, controlled, predictable. Give me 5 minutes, I said. Jordan nodded. No questions. I sat there after she left, not moving, not rushing, just sitting. This was the moment, the last quiet moment before everything shifted. I picked up the folder. Herr Folla. Ran my thumb along the edge. For a second, just a second, I considered walking away, canceling, letting someone else handle it, but that would have been easier. And easy doesn't resolve anything. It just delays it. So I stood up, walked across the office. Through the glass walls, I could see her. She was sitting outside conference room B, back straight, portfolio on her lap, hands resting lightly on top of it, composed, but not relaxed. I knew that posture. I had seen it every Sunday for years, but this was different, subtly. There was tension in it, not visible to most people, but I could see it. This wasn't Sunday dinner. There was something at stake here, something real. She didn't look at her phone, didn't fidget, didn't distract herself. She was ready, and she had no idea. I watched her for a moment longer than I should have, trying to understand what I felt. Anger? No. Satisfaction? Not quite. It was something else, something harder to define. Clarity. Jordan walked her into the room at 9:58, set a glass of water down, said something brief, left. I waited 10 seconds, not for effect, for control. Then I opened the door. She was looking at her phone when I walked in. She looked up, and I watched it happen. In real time, recognition, first confusion, Auflicker, a moment where her brain tried to process something that didn't fit. Then realization. Her eyes widened. Not dramatically, but enough. Her posture changed. Just slightly, but enough. Then the final step, understanding what this room was, what I was doing here, what she was doing here. 2 seconds. That's how long it took. Her portfolio slipped from her hands, hit the floor. Neither of us moved to pick it up. Adrian? Not confident, not composed, not controlled, just human. I closed the door behind me, walked to the table, sat down. Please, I said calmly, have a seat. She was already sitting, but she adjusted, instinctively, like she had to reorient herself inside a reality that no longer made sense. I placed her folder on the table, folded my hands, looked at her, and just like that, the roles had reversed, not loudly, not aggressively, but completely. Let's start with your portfolio, I said. Walk me through your strongest campaign. Her mouth opened, closed, then opened again. For the first few minutes, she wasn't herself. Too many words, too many details, too much effort to sound composed. I let her talk, didn't interrupt, didn't help. Because this wasn't about catching her off guard. It was about seeing who she actually was, without the performance. And slowly, it happened. The shift, her voice steadied. Her thinking sharpened. She stopped looking at her notes and started speaking. Not as my sister. Not as the person from Sunday dinners. As a professional. And she was good. Not perfect, but real. The client wanted something timeless, she said, leaning slightly forward. But timeless usually means safe. And safe doesn't build loyalty. I watched her. So we made it specific, she continued. Something that would either feel outdated in 5 years or iconic. A pause. It was a risk. How did you convince them? I asked. She held my gaze. I didn't try to convince them, she said. I showed them what they were afraid of losing if they didn't take it. Silence, that was a real answer. Not rehearsed. Not performed. Earned. I nodded slightly. Tell me about a project that failed. No hesitation this time. There was one, she said. Retail launch, 3 years ago. Her jaw tightened. I rushed the execution before the positioning was fully locked. No excuses. By the time we fixed the strategy, the visuals were already in production. She exhaled. We couldn't afford to redo it. And now? She didn't pause. I'd slow it down, she said. Get alignment first, even if it costs time up front. Another real answer. I leaned back slightly. This wasn't going the way I expected. Or maybe it was. And I just hadn't wanted to admit it. The interview continued. Questions. Answers. Back and forth. Until finally, it ended. The professional part, at least. There was a pause. The kind that happens when everything that should be said has already been said, but something else was still there. Unspoken. She looked at me. Not as an interviewer. Not as a CEO. As something else. Can I ask you something? She said. I nodded. How long? Simple question. Heavy meaning. 6 years, I said. Her eyes dropped to the table. 6 years. That number hit her. I could see it. 6 years, she repeated softly. Not a question. A realization. I told them you were still figuring things out, she said. There it was. Not defensive. Not cruel. Honest. I know, I said. Silence. I believed it, she added. That one landed differently. Because it wasn't about what she said. It was about what she thought. What she chose to accept as truth. I didn't respond. Which is worse, she said quietly. Maybe. Maybe not, I said. She looked up. For the first time since I walked in, there was no performance left. No control. No image. Just her. And for a moment, neither of us said anything. Because this wasn't about the job anymore. This was about everything we hadn't said for years. Everything we had both chosen not to see. And for the first time, we were both looking at it. Without filters. Without roles. Without the safety of silence. And there was no going back. The room didn't feel the same anymore. Not after that moment. Not after the silence that followed her last sentence. There are conversations that move forward. And then there are conversations that shift. This was the second kind. We were no longer in an interview. Not really. The roles were still there. Technically, I was still sitting at the head of the table. She was still the candidate. But something underneath had changed. Because for the first time in years, we were no longer performing for anyone else. No parents. No expectations. No invisible scoreboard keeping track of who was ahead. Just two people, finally looking at each other without the story wrapped around them. I broke the silence. You're good, I said. Simple. Direct. Her reaction was immediate. A flicker of something in her eyes. Not pride. Not relief. Something closer to confusion. Because that wasn't what she expected. I mean that, I added. Objectively. She nodded slowly. Still processing. Thank you. And for a second, it almost felt normal. Like this could just be what it looked like. A professional conversation. A qualified candidate. A fair evaluation. But then reality crept back in. Because this wasn't just any candidate. This was the person who had sat across from me for years and never once asked what I actually did. And he had left her. That part mattered. More than I expected. I leaned forward slightly. There's something we need to address, I said. Her posture tightened again. Not fear. Not quite. Anticipation. She knew what was coming. Just not how it would land. If you take this role, I continued, you would be reporting directly to me. A beat. I figured, she said quietly. No surprise. No denial. Just acceptance. And that changes things. She didn't respond. But I could see it. The calculation. Not strategic. Personnel. Because this wasn't just about work. This was about identity. About power. About everything we had never defined between us. I could offer you the position, I said. There it was. Out in the open. No drama. No build-up. Just truth. Her eyes lifted, locked onto mine. She didn't speak, but the question was there. Are you going to? And underneath that, something deeper. What does that make us if you do? I let the silence sit. Because this was the real decision, not hiring, not strategy. What do you think would happen? I asked, if you worked here. She blinked, not expecting the question. I don't know, she said. Tre. Another pause, longer this time. She looked down at the table, then back up. It would be complicated. Honest. Yes, I said. Another silence. And not just here, I added. Her expression shifted. She understood. Sunday dinners, she said. Exactly. The word hung in the air, because now we were saying it. Out loud. The thing that had been controlling everything without ever being named. The moment I hire you, I continued, this stops being about your work. She didn't interrupt. It becomes a story, I said. A narrative they can understand. Her jaw tightened slightly. You become the one I gave an opportunity to, I said, and I become the one who finally made it. Silence, and nothing actually changes, I finished. That landed. I could see it. Because she knew it was true. This wouldn't fix anything. It would just rearrange the same dynamic. Different roles, same structure. She leaned back slightly. So what are you saying? She asked. Direct. Good. I'm saying this isn't the right place for you. There it was. Final. Clear. Unavoidable. Her reaction was quiet. No anger. No argument. Just stillness. Like something had settled into place. I see, she said. And she meant it. That was the surprising part. She actually understood. Not just the decision, the reason behind it. And that changed everything. Because this wasn't rejection. Not really. It was separation. A line being drawn where one had never existed before. For what it's worth, I added, this has nothing to do with your ability. She gave a small, almost tired smile. I know, she said. And she did. That was new. For the first time in years, we were actually hearing each other. Without distortion, without assumptions, without the need to be right. Just understanding. I reached for the folder, turned it toward me. There are places that would be a better fit for you, I said. She didn't respond. I can make a few calls, I added. That got her attention. Her eyes narrowed slightly. Why would you do that? She asked. Fair question. I held her gaze. Because you deserve a role that's actually yours. Silence, deep, heavy. Because that sentence carried more than just meaning. It carried history. Everything we hadn't said, everything we hadn't acknowledged. You think this wouldn't be mine? She asked. Not defensive. Genuine. I think it would always come with an asterisk, I said. She didn't argue. Didn't push back. Because she knew. She had lived inside that system too. Different role. Same pressure. We both had. And this was the first time either of us had stepped outside it, not by winning, but by refusing to play. The realization hit slowly. I could see it in her expression, the shift from expectation to understanding to something else, something quieter. Respect. Not the loud kind, not admiration, but recognition. Real. Earned. And that mattered more than anything she had ever said at that table. She stood up slowly. Not rushed, not awkward, just deliberate. Picked up her portfolio from the floor, placed it neatly on the table, then looked at me. Thank you, she said. Same words she had used before. But this time, they meant something different. Not for the interview, she added. A small pause. For not turning this into something else. I understood. Revenge, power, humiliation. All the things I could have chosen. All the things she expected. At least a part of her. And didn't get. I didn't do it for you, I said. Honest. She nodded. I know, she said. And that was the final shift. Because for the first time, we weren't trying to prove anything to each other. We were just seeing each other. Clearly. She walked to the door. Paused. Adrian. I looked up. She hesitated. Just for a second. Then, I would have never asked. There it was. The truth. Simple. I know, I said. She nodded. Then she opened the door and walked out, just like that. No explosion. No dramatic ending. Just quiet. But that quiet carried more weight than anything that had happened in 6 years. I sat there for a moment after she left. Not moving. Not thinking. Just feeling the absence of something that had been there for a long time. Expectation, pressure, the need to prove, gone. And in its place, something unfamiliar, peace. Not because I had won, but because I had chosen not to fight. And for the first time, that felt like enough. The strange thing about life-changing moments is how quiet they are afterward. No music, no dramatic shift in the sky, no clear signal that something irreversible just happened. Just continuation. I walked out of that conference room, back into the office, back into the noise, back into the rhythm of a day that didn't care what had just unfolded behind a glass wall. People were laughing near the kitchen. Someone was arguing over a deadline. A phone rang. Someone answered it. Everything was the same. But I wasn't. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way anyone else would notice. Just lighter. Like I had been carrying something for years, and only now realized I had finally put it down. Isat at my desk. Opened my laptop. Looked at the candidate evaluation form. This part mattered, because this was where emotion had to disappear. No history. No context. No family. Just facts. Portfolio. Strong. Strategic thinking. Sharp. Execution. Consistent. Leadership potential. Real. I wrote it all down. Clean. Objective. Accurate. No mention of the silence. No mention of the past. No mention of the moment her world shifted in front of her eyes. Because, professionally, none of that existed. And that was the discipline. Not letting something personal corrupt something real. I finished the report. Read it once. Closed it. Marcus stopped by around noon. Coffee in hand. Same as always. Well, he asked. No pressure. No expectation. Just the question. I looked at him. We're not moving forward. He didn't react immediately, which is why I trusted him. All right, he said after a moment. No why. No pushback. No second guessing. Just acceptance. Because he knew, if I made that call, it wasn't random. He nodded once, walked away. And just like that, it was done. At least, on paper, but some decisions don't end when you make them. They echo. That night, I sat in my apartment, city lights stretching across the glass. The same view I had seen 100 times before, but something felt different. Not the city, not the room, me. I picked up my phone, put it down, picked it up again, because there was one thing left to do. Not required, not expected, but necessary. I called her. She answered on the second ring. Adrian. Her voice was calm, too calm, like she had already processed it, already accepted it, already moved on. I wanted to tell you directly, I said. A pause. You're not getting the role. Silence. Then, I figured. No bitterness, no disappointment, just understanding. That hit harder than anything else, because she wasn't fighting it. She saw it. Is it because of us? She asked. Not accusing. Careful. Measured. I leaned back slightly. No, I said. Not because of Sunday dinners. A beat. It's because if you worked here, I paused. We'd recreate the same dynamic in a different place. Silence. And I don't want that, I added. Another pause. For the company, I said. And for us? The word hung there. Us. Something we had never defined, never protected, never even acknowledged. Until now, I get it, she said quietly. And she did. That was the difference. This wasn't the version of her from 6 months ago. This was someone who had seen something real and couldn't unsee it. What do you want then? She asked. That question mattered because it wasn't about the job anymore. It was about direction, about intention, about something neither of us had ever clarified. I thought about it. Not long. I want to start over, I said. A pause. Not here, I added. Not like this. Silence. I want to get coffee, I said. Simple. Small, but real. No expectations. No roles. No history controlling it. I could hear her breathing on the other end. That's it? She asked. That's where I'd start. Another pause. Longer this time, but not heavy. Different. Like something was forming. Okay, she said. Soft. Certain. Okay. I ended the call. And for a moment, I just sat there, phone in my hand, screen dark. Because something had shifted. Not fixed. Not solved, but opened. And sometimes That's enough. I didn't stop there. The next morning, I wrote something. Not emotional, not personal, professional, a recommendation. For here. I listed what I had seen, what she did well, where she stood out, not exaggerated, not softened, just true. Then I sent it to someone I trusted, someone who could actually use her, not define her. I didn't tell her, didn't need to. 11 days later, she texted me. I got an offer. I read it once, then replied, good. 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then, thank you. I looked at the message, then put my phone down. Because this wasn't something that needed a conversation. She had earned it. That was the point. Not given, not handed, not framed as a favor. Earned. A few weeks later, we met. Coffee shop. Neutral ground. Not our parents' house. Not my office. Just space. The first 5 minutes were awkward. Of course they were. Years of silence don't disappear instantly. But then, something shifted. We stopped trying to perform. She talked about her new job. Honestly, not inflated, not polished. I talked about mine, without hiding it. And for the first time, we weren't comparing. We were just talking. Two people, not roles, not labels. People. We stayed longer than expected. Not because we had to, because neither of us wanted to leave too early. That mattered. A month later, Sunday dinner happened again. Same table, same food, same routine, but something was different, subtle, invisible to most people. But there, my father started the same way. Golf, stories, other people's success. My mother asked the same questions. And then, inevitably, it came. That little company of yours still keeping you busy? He asked. But this time, there was no edge, no mockery, just curiosity. Before I could answer, she spoke. She has almost 40 employees now. Simple, direct, no emotion, no performance, just truth. The table went quiet. My father looked at her, then at me, then down at his plate. 40? He said. 38, I corrected. A pause. Then, who? Ha. Not approval, not pride, but not dismissal either. Something in between. Something new. And that was enough. Because here's the truth no one tells you. You don't need people to fully understand you for something to change. Sometimes, all it takes is one crack in the story they've been telling themselves, and everything starts to shift. Not instantly, not dramatically, but permanently. That night, driving home, I hit the same red light, same intersection, same timing, but my hands on the wheel felt different, looser, not gripping, not holding tension I didn't even realize I carried. Just steady, because for the first time in years, I wasn't trying to prove anything. Not to them, not to her, not even to myself. And that's when it hit me. This was never about revenge. Not really. It was about something much harder, letting go of the need to be seen by people who had already decided not to look. And once you let go of that, you don't lose anything. You get your freedom back. Here's the truth no one tells you about being underestimated. At first, it feels like a disadvantage, like you're invisible, like nothing you do counts, like you're stuck, proving yourself to people who never seem convinced. So you try harder. You explain more. You defend yourself. You wait for the moment when everything finally clicks and they see you. But that moment rarely comes, not because you failed, but because they were never really looking. And eventually, you stop trying. Not out of weakness, out of understanding. You realize something most people don't. Being unseen can be painful, but it's also powerful. Because when no one expects anything from you, you're free. Free to build quietly. Free to fail privately. Free to grow without constant judgment shaping your decisions. That's what Adrian did. He didn't win by proving them wrong. He didn't stand at the table and demand recognition. He didn't walk into that boardroom looking for revenge. He did something much harder. He let go of the need to be understood by people who had already decided who he was. And when the moment finally came, when he had all the power, when he could have rewritten the entire story in one move, he didn't use it to win. He used it to be free. Because real power isn't making people regret how they treated you. It's reaching a point where their opinion no longer controls your identity. And here's the part that changes everything. The people you've been silently competing with your whole life might not even know they're in a competition. They're performing too, trying to meet expectations, trying to stay on top, trying to survive in a system they didn't create. Just like you. Different roles, same pressure. And sometimes, the moment you stop trying to win against them is the moment you finally understand them. Not as rivals, but as people. If there's one thing to take from this story, it's this. You don't need to prove your worth to the room that doubted you. You don't need to win the game they designed. You just need to build something real. And stop asking for permission to believe in it. Because the day you stop needing their validation is the day you stop being controlled by their opinion. And that is the quietest form of revenge there is. If this story felt familiar, if there's a version of you that someone else misunderstood for years, tell me your story in the comments. Because the hardest battles are the ones we fight in silence. And the moment you speak them out loud, you realize you were never alone.